She rushed her son into the ICU, unaware her billionaire CEO ex was fighting for his life in the same hospital. She thought she was racing to save one life. She didn't know the man who once broke her heart was fighting for his 2 floors up. Have you ever had to stay calm when the person you love can't catch a breath? Huge thanks for getting Mr. Steele Rich Stories past 800 subscribers. Y'all are incredible. If you're new, hit subscribe and join the family. Tonight, a storm, an ambulance, and a mother who must choose presence over panic. Because in 24 hours, an unsent truth will change everything. The rain hit Eden Parker's windshield like spilled nails, each drop hammering against glass already streaked with tears she wouldn't acknowledge. Her knuckles went white against the steering wheel as she took the corner towards St. Pacifica Medical Center, tires screaming their protest against wet asphalt. In the back seat, Silas gasped, not crying, just fighting for air the way 7-year-olds shouldn't have to fight for anything. Almost there, baby. Almost there. Eden's voice stayed steady even as her speedometer climbed past reasonable. The hospital's emergency entrance bloomed red through the storm, those blessed automatic doors already sensing her approach, sliding open like arms ready to catch them both. She didn't park. She abandoned it. Door hanging open, hazards blinking their frantic rhythm, Eden lifted Silas from his car seat, his small body burning against her rain-soaked jacket. His chest pulled inward with each breath, that hollow beneath his ribs deepening, the sight that had launched her from their apartment 15 minutes ago when his usual inhaler did nothing. Pediatric respiratory distress incoming. Someone shouted before Eden's feet hit the tile. The triage team materialized like they'd been waiting. Dr. Rowan Ivers with hands that moved faster than thought, Nurse Talia Reed already wheeling equipment into position. How long has he been like this? Dr. Ivers asked, fingers already on Silas's pulse, eyes tracking the blue tinge creeping around his lips. 20 minutes, maybe 25, his rescue inhaler. Eden's explanation got swallowed by motion as they transferred Silas to a gurney. The nebulizer mask covered half his face, making him look smaller, more fragile than any 7-year-old should look. Continuous albuterol, prep for 4 steroids, Dr. Ivers called out, his voice carrying that particular calm that emergency doctors perfect, urgent without panic, swift without chaos. Mum, you're doing great. Stay where he can see you. Eden grabbed Silas's hand, matching her breathing to the rhythm she wanted him to find. Slow in, slower out. The monitors began their electronic symphony, oxygen saturation climbing from dangerous red numbers towards something that loosened the fist around her heart. 82, 85, 88. That's it, sweetheart, she whispered against his forehead. You're doing so good. Mummy's right here. The word here became her anchor. Not racing through possibilities, not drowning in what-ifs, just here, present. Her son's hand in hers, his breathing gradually sinking with the steady hiss of medication turning to mist in his mask. This was what mattered. Not the meeting she'd abandoned, not the promotion she'd been chasing, not the life she'd been running towards so fast she'd almost missed the one right in front of her. Saturations at 92, Nurse Reed announced, adjusting the 4-line with practiced precision. He's responding well. Eden felt her knees threaten to buckle, relief hitting harder than fear had. She kissed Silas's knuckles, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized were falling. In the corner of the emergency department, a television played the late news on mute, something about a tech CEO and stock prices, but Eden's world had shrunk to this gurney, this hand in hers, this next breath, and the next. We're going to move him to pediatric ICU for monitoring, Dr. Ivers explained, his tone shifting from crisis to care. Standard protocol with severe asthma exacerbation. He'll need continuous treatments overnight, but he's stable. You got him here in time. In time. Those 2 words held entire futures. They wheeled Silas through corridors that smelled like disinfectant and determination, past rooms where other battles played out behind closed doors. Eden jogged to keep up, her wet shoes squeaking against linoleum, leaving puddles that janitors would mop without complaint because they understood In hospitals, messes meant someone made it inside. The PICU doors sealed with a soft hush, separating the chaos of emergency from the watchful quiet of intensive care. Eden settled into the chair beside Silas's bed, her hand finding his again beneath the tangle of tubes and wires. His eyes fluttered open, finding her immediately. "Mommy." The word came out muffled by the mask. "Right here, baby. I'm right here." She meant it differently now. Not just physically present, but wholly here. Her phone forgotten in the car, her mind not racing ahead to tomorrow's obligations or backward to tonight's abandoned plans. Just here, counting his breaths, watching color return to his cheeks, being exactly where love demanded she be. The PICU existed in its own time zone, where night and day blurred into cycles of medication and monitoring. Other parents occupied similar vigils in nearby rooms, a father pacing while speaking quietly into his phone, a grandmother knitting in rhythm with ventilator sounds, a couple holding each other as doctors delivered news in hushed tones. Eden had been in this space before, when Silas was 4, and pneumonia had complicated into something worse. She'd learned then that hospitals had their own language, their own hierarchy of beeps and alarms. The steady ones meant stability. The urgent ones brought nurses running. You learned quickly which sounds meant crisis and which just meant machines talking to themselves. "First time here?" The question came from the woman in the next bay over, separated by a curtain that provided the illusion of privacy. "Or return visitor?" "Second visit," Eden admitted quietly. "You, 5th. My daughter has a congenital heart condition. We're regulars." The woman's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd learned to function on adrenaline and whatever passed for coffee in hospital cafeterias. It gets easier and harder at the same time, if that makes sense. It did. Eden understood the paradox of experience. Knowing what to expect didn't make it hurt less, just differently. 3 floors above, in the adult cardiac intensive care unit, Hunter Sloan shifted in medication-dulled sleep. The monitors surrounding his bed sang their own electronic vigil, tracking rhythms that had gone dangerously irregular 4 hours ago when his assistant had found him collapsed in his office, hand pressed against his chest, face the color of ash. The heart attack had been what doctors called significant, the kind that rewrote your future in the space between one heartbeat failing and the next one struggling to come. At 41, Hunter had believed himself immune to such ordinary mortality. He ran, didn't smoke, paid a nutritionist to plan meals he rarely had time to eat. But hearts, it turned out, kept their own accounts, and he had finally called in debts accumulated through years of 18-hour days and stress that lived permanently in his shoulders. His nurse, an efficient professional named Bradley, checked vitals with the quiet competence of someone who'd seen too many executives ignore chest pain until it became a catastrophe. "Mr. Sloan, your blood pressure's holding steady. Try to rest. The cardiologist will round in the morning." Hunter managed a nod, too exhausted to argue that rest felt impossible, when your body had just demonstrated its capacity for betrayal. Through the window, the storm that had brought Eden racing to the emergency entrance. Below was beginning to ease, rain shifting from assault to mere persistence. He'd been thinking about Eden Parker when the pain started, not the crushing kind that followed, but the first sharp reminder that hearts break in more ways than one. 7 years since she'd walked away, since he'd chosen ambition over admission, since he'd let a misunderstanding become silence that calcified into absence. The proposal ring still sat in his office safe, a monument to timing. That couldn't have been worse, and words he'd never gotten to say. A different nurse entered to adjust his 4, check the cardiac monitor, make notes on a tablet with practiced efficiency. Hunter's eyes drifted closed again, medication pulling him under despite his mind's resistance. In that space between waking and sleep, he thought he heard footsteps in the hallway. Quick ones, urgent ones, the sound of someone who'd been running through rain. But the medication won, dragging him down into uneasy dreams where he kept trying to catch something that stayed just out of reach. Back in the PICU, Silas's breathing had settled into a rhythm that allowed Eden to release the terror she'd been holding since his first wheeze. Talia returned with a blanket and a cup of something that approximated coffee. offering both with a smile that acknowledged the liquid's inadequacies. "Hospital special," she said. "Tastes like regret, but it's warm." Eden accepted gratefully, wrapping her hands around the cup more for the heat than any expectation of quality. "Thank you. For everything. For knowing exactly what to do when I was falling apart." "You weren't falling apart. You were being present while scared, which is basically the definition of bravery." Talia checked Silas's oxygen levels, adjusted the nebulizer's flow with minute precision. "These numbers look good. He's a fighter, your boy. He shouldn't have to fight this hard just to breathe." "No," Talia agreed simply. "But he's doing it anyway, and you're here, which matters more than you think. Kids heal faster when they feel safe." After she left, Eden sat in the peculiar silence of the PICU. Not quiet exactly, but filled with purposeful sounds. Ventilators breathing for those who couldn't, monitors tracking hearts that needed watching, the soft conversations of medical staff coordinating care with the efficiency of people who held lives in the balance every shift. She thought about the presentation she'd abandoned mid-sentence, the Singapore client who'd been on the video call when she'd grabbed her keys and run, that promotion she'd been chasing, associate director, better salary, validation that she was, succeeding at the life she'd built from nothing after everything fell apart 7 years ago. It felt distant now, like something that mattered to a different person in a different life. Her phone, still in the car, probably held a dozen messages about consequences and disappointment. But consequences could wait. Disappointment could queue behind the relief of watching her son's chest rise and fall without. That terrible pulling, that hollow space that meant air wasn't reaching where it needed to go. "Mommy." Silas's voice came small and sleepy behind the mask. "Right here, baby. Are we staying here tonight?" "Yes. The doctors want to watch you. Make sure the medicine keeps working." "Okay." He accepted this with the resignation of someone who'd done this before. "Will you stay too?" "I'm not going anywhere." The promise felt sacred, absolute. "You and me, we're a team. Teams stick together." His hand squeezed hers once, twice, then relaxed as sleep claimed him again. Eden watched him in the low light, memorizing the peace on his face now that breathing had stopped being a battle. She thought about all the moments she'd been chasing future security instead of present connection. All the times she'd chosen productivity over this, simply being here, fully here, for the person who needed her most. The attending physician stopped by near midnight, a woman named Dr. Cassidy Morris who carried a tablet and the kind of calm that came from years of delivering news both good and devastating. "Silas is responding beautifully to treatment," she said, keeping her voice low to avoid waking him. "We'll continue the continuous nebulizers through the night, monitor his oxygen levels, and adjust as needed. Plan for at least 48 hours here, but he's past the crisis point." 48 hours, Eden repeated, doing math about work obligations and childcare arrangements, and all the logistical complications that came with unexpected hospitalization. Dr. Morris seemed to read her mind. "There's a social worker who can help with the practical details. Work notifications, insurance questions, parking passes. Don't try to carry all of this alone." After she left, Eden sat with that instruction. Don't carry it alone. The advice felt foreign, against every instinct she'd developed in 7 years of determined independence. She'd built a life that didn't require anyone's help, didn't depend on anyone who could leave. Safe, controlled, sufficient, and lonely, if she was being honest in this small hour when truth felt easier than daylight allowed. Above her, separated by 3 floors and 7 years of silence, Hunter Sloan dreamed of rain and proposals. That never happened, and a woman whose name he'd called out in delirium before the EMTs arrived. His heart, damaged but determined, beat its steady rhythm while monitors tracked every pulse, every potential for failure or recovery. Neither of them knew yet that they were in the same building, that the storm had brought them to the same place. At the same time, that the truth Eden had mailed 7 years ago was about to become impossible to avoid. 2 patients, 1 hospital, 1 past that wouldn't stay quiet much longer. Parents, what's one mantra that calms your kid when they're scared? Drop it in the comments. Your words might help another parent racing through their own storm tonight. The chair beside Silas's bed had transformed into Eden's entire universe by 3 in the morning. Her jeans, still damp from the storm, clung uncomfortably to her legs. But moving meant letting go of his hand, and that wasn't happening. The PICU hummed with its particular midnight rhythm, ventilators breathing for those who couldn't, monitors tracking heartbeats. The parents counted like prayer beads, nurses moving through pools of low light with the grace of those who guard sleep. Talia Reid appeared with a blanket and a cup of something that might generously be called coffee. "Hospital blend," she said, with a gentle smile that acknowledged the liquid's crimes against taste. "But it's warm, and warm counts for something at this hour." Eden accepted both offerings, the blanket a small mercy against the air conditioning that kept the unit cold enough to discourage whatever germs hadn't already been defeated by industrial-grade sanitizer. The coffee tasted like burnt hope, but Talia was right. Warm counted for something. "First time in PICU?" Talia asked, adjusting Silas's oxygen monitor with movements so gentle they didn't disturb his finally steady sleep. "Second," Eden admitted. "But last time he was 4. I thought we'd outgrown the severe attacks." Asthma likes to remind us who's in charge sometimes. Talia checked the nebulizer's medication level. "But look at those numbers. Oxygen at 96%, respiratory rate normalizing. He's a fighter." Fighter. Eden studied her son's face, peaceful now behind the mask that had become his lifeline. She'd taught him to fight for grades, for goals, for the future she'd mapped out in achievement markers. But tonight, his body had fought a different battle, one that didn't care about his perfect attendance record or his advanced reading level. A soft knock preceded someone new. A woman with kind eyes and a clipboard that somehow looked non-threatening in her hands. "Eden, I'm Kira Morales, a hospital social worker. Mind if I sit?" Eden gestured to the empty chair, too tired to wonder what forms needed filling at this ungodly hour. Kira settled in with the ease of someone who'd sat vigil in 100 rooms like this. "I'm here for the practical stuff that hurts your head right now. Insurance authorizations, work notifications if you need them, parking validation that actually works. The things that feel impossible when your whole world is in that bed. The kindness of it, the simple acknowledgement that mundane details still existed and someone else could carry them, nearly undid Eden's composure. I left my phone in the car. My boss, God, I just walked out of a client presentation. At midnight?" Kira's eyebrow lifted slightly. Singapore call, time zones. Eden rubbed her temple where a headache had set up residence. "I'm supposed to be landing their account, supposed to be proving I deserve the promotion they've been dangling for 6 months. Supposed to be right here," Kira finished gently. "Your employer is legally required to provide family medical leave. I can draft the notification if you'd like, and handle the paperwork. Let them worry about Singapore, while you worry about what matters." "What matters?" Eden looked at Silas's hand in hers, so small despite how fast he'd been growing. She'd measured his childhood in milestones and achievements, in preparing him for someday. But someday had almost not come, and all those preparations meant nothing, compared to this, being present for the breaths he took right now. "If I could be the medicine," Eden whispered, not really meaning to speak aloud. "If I could just breathe for him." "You are," Kira said simply. "Every parent who stays, who holds on, who shows up. Your medicine these monitors can't measure. He knows you're here. That matters more than you think." In the waiting room visible through the doorway, a television played its hourly news refresh on mute. Stock tickers scrolled across the bottom, weather predictions, something about a local tech company, and executive health concerns. Eden barely registered it, her attention fixed on Silas's steady breathing, on the rise and fall of his chest that no longer looked like labor. Kira made notes, gathered information with questions that barely felt like questions. Anyone we should call? Family? Friends? Sometimes people want to help, but don't know how. "It's just us," Eden said, the truth of it sitting heavy. "Has been for a while. Not by choice exactly, but by the accumulation of choices, working late instead of accepting dinner invitations, choosing productivity over possibility, building a life so carefully controlled that there wasn't room for the mess of real connection. The same careful control that had made her write a letter 7 years ago, instead of having one conversation. The memory surfaced uninvited, rain like tonight, but summer warm. A rooftop restaurant, a ring hidden in Hunter's jacket pocket that she'd felt when she'd borrowed it against the breeze. Joy rose like champagne bubbles until she'd excused herself to the ladies' room, giddy with the yes she'd practiced in mirrors. But another patron had been showing her phone to her companion, and there it was, a gossip. Sight photo of Hunter at a charity gala the week before when he'd said he was in Boston. A woman's hand on his arm, her face turned away, but her body language suggesting intimacy. The headlines speculating about the tech world's most eligible bachelor finally being caught. Eden had stared at that photo until her eyes burned, doubt spreading like spilled wine across white cloth. When she'd returned to the table, the ring never appeared. Hunter had seemed distracted, checking his phone, mentioning a crisis with investors, and Eden had smiled and nodded and felt the eyes die in her throat. The letter she'd left with his building's front desk that night had been precise in its pain. Explanation and goodbye wrapped in words that didn't convey how much it cost to write them. Clean break, she'd told herself. Better to leave with dignity than wait to be replaced. The second letter, mailed 3 weeks later when the pregnancy test turned positive, had been harder. She'd sent it to his office, marked personal and confidential, with her new address and phone number included. Waited 3 months for any response, a call, a letter, even just acknowledgement that he'd received it. Silence had been her answer. She'd moved forward then, built a life that didn't include space for Hunter Sloan or the future they'd almost had. Focused on Silas, on work, on proving she could do this alone because alone was all she had. Eden? Doctor. Ivers appeared in the doorway, pulling her back to now. Good news. Silas is responding beautifully to treatment. We'll keep him on continuous nebulizers through the night, 4 steroids to reduce inflammation. Plan for at least 48 hours here, but he's turned the corner. 48 hours. In her other life, the one from yesterday, that would have meant catastrophe. Missed meetings, lost opportunities, the Singapore deal definitely dead. But sitting here with Silas's pulse steady under her fingers, those concerns felt like artifacts from someone else's priorities. Whatever he needs, Eden said, meaning it absolutely. Dr. Ivers smiled, the expression of someone who'd seen parents rearrange their entire existence in these chairs. He needs rest, medication, and time. And you being here, that's medicine too. Kids heal faster when they feel safe. Safe. Eden thought about all the ways she'd tried to create safety through control, through planning, through never depending on anyone else. But real safety, she was learning, might be simpler. A hand holding yours when breathing gets hard, someone who stays even when machines do the work, love that shows up without conditions or qualifications. Kira left forms and gentle instructions, promising to return in the morning with parking passes and official letters that would make Eden's absence acceptable to people who measured worth in billable hours. Talia brought another blanket and didn't mention the tears that had finally come, silent and necessary, as the rain was still falling outside. I'm not going anywhere, Eden whispered to Silas as dawn crept grey through the windows. Not anymore. The promise felt larger than this room, deeper than this crisis. She'd spent 7 years going everywhere, forward, upward, away from the ghost of what might have been. But her son had needed her to stop, to stay, to be present for the breath he was taking right now instead of the future she was racing toward. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not healing, exactly, but the kind of honest exhaustion that stops pretending and just exists. 3 floors up, morning brought its own reckonings. Hunter woke to find his assistant, an efficient professional named Lauren, in the doorway with coffee that smelled expensive and news that probably wasn't. The board convenes at 9, she said carefully. They're calling it a wellness check, but Pierce has been making calls since 6 a.m. Thought you should know. Hunter's heart monitor registered his reaction before he could control it, earning a warning. Look from Bradley. who appeared as if summoned by the mere suggestion of stress. "No board meetings from bed," Bradley said firmly. "Doctor's orders. Your heart just tried to quit. Maybe give it 24 hours before the hostile takeover attempts." "It's not a takeover. It's standard continuity protocol," Lauren started. "It's Pierce being Pierce," Hunter interrupted, too tired for corporate doublespeak. "Tell them I'm alive, stable, and will participate via video once Dr. Caldwell clears it. Probably tomorrow." After Lauren left with instructions and visible relief, Bradley adjusted the four with practiced efficiency. "You know what helps hearts heal? Not thinking about people trying to steal your job while you're in intensive care." "Noted." Hunter stared at the ceiling tiles, counting holes because it was better than counting regrets. His office had been cleared per protocol, personal items boxed, computer locked, safe contents inventoried. Standard procedure when executives collapsed, Lauren had explained. Nothing personal, just protecting company assets and sensitive information. But it felt personal. Felt like his life being packed away while he was still breathing, still fighting to keep breathing, still trying to figure out how he'd gotten here, 41 and alone, and successful at everything except what mattered. He'd been thinking about Eden when the pain started, not for the first time that week, or that month, or that year if he was being honest. 7 years hadn't erased her, had just moved her from present tense to persistent ache, the kind that lived in his chest alongside whatever cholesterol blockage had finally demanded attention. "Mr. Sloan?" A new voice, this one carrying a tablet and the kind of authority that made billionaires feel like kindergartners. Dr. Mira Caldwell, the cardiologist who'd inserted stents while Hunter was unconscious and probably saved his life. "How are we feeling this morning?" "Alive," Hunter offered, the words both grateful and embarrassed. "Barely. And only because your assistant had the good sense to call emergency services when you insisted you just needed aspirin." "Doctor." Caldwell pulled up his cardiac readings on the bedside monitor. 3 days of chest pain you ignored. Shortness of breath you attributed to stress. Left arm numbness you Googled instead of addressing. Your heart attack was entirely preventable if you'd just listened to your body instead of your schedule. "I know." Hunter had heard variations of this lecture before, after his father's death 7 years ago. Had promised himself he'd be different. Had lied, apparently. Rest, Dr. Caldwell prescribed with the finality of someone who'd seen too many repeat customers. Real rest. Not the kind where you work from bed, the kind where you remember you're human, not a productivity machine. She left him with that thought, and a blood pressure cuff that tightened every 15 minutes like a mechanical conscience. Hunter closed his eyes, trying to follow orders, trying to rest. But his mind kept circling back to the same place it had been when his heart decided to object. To Eden, to the letter she'd left, to the proposal he'd never given, to 7 years of wondering where she'd gone and why. His phone, confiscated by Bradley but visible on the side table, held 7 years of dead-end searches. Private investigators who'd found nothing. Her mother who'd refused to share anything beyond she's safe and doesn't want contact. Friends who'd closed ranks or genuinely didn't know. Eden Parker had vanished like she'd never existed, leaving only the memory of Slow, dancing in his kitchen, and the ring in his safe that had never found her finger. "You need something for pain?" Bradley asked, noting whatever expression had crossed Hunter's face. "No," Hunter said. "Just thinking." "Well, stop. Thinking elevates your heart rate, and your heart has opinions about that." Bradley adjusted the pillow with unexpected gentleness. "Whatever you're chewing on can wait until you're stronger." But some things Hunter was learning didn't wait. Some things lived in your chest until they demanded attention, whether through blocked arteries or blocked words, whether through heart attacks or heartbreak that had never quite healed. Somewhere below him, 3 floors down in the pediatric intensive care unit, Eden Parker was learning the same lesson in a different language. That presence mattered more than performance. That love required showing up, not just succeeding. That sometimes the bravest thing wasn't pushing forward, but being still enough to see what you'd been running from. Neither of them knew yet that they were in the same building, that the storm had brought them to the same place after 7 years of separation. that the truth was about to become impossible to avoid. What's one small thing that helped you through a scary hospital night? Share below. Your comfort might be exactly what another parent needs to hear. 7 years ago, Eden had believed in signs. The way Hunter appeared at her favorite riverside market on a Saturday when she'd sworn off, dating, examining handmade journals at the booth where she bought her poetry notebooks. He'd picked up the one with constellation maps on the cover, the exact one she'd been saving for. Good choice, she'd said, then immediately regretted speaking to a stranger. He'd turned, and his smile had rearranged something fundamental in her chest. Is it? I know nothing about journals. I just like that this one maps out where we're going instead of where we've been. He'd insisted she take it. She'd insisted on coffee as payment. 3 hours later, they were still talking as the market vendors packed up. Around them, and Eden had forgotten she didn't believe in signs anymore. Hunter Sloan wasn't what she'd expected from tech money. He remembered the names of every barista, carried cash specifically to tip, street musicians, and read actual books with bent corners and coffee stains. He put too much sugar in her tea when he made it, claiming she needed sweetening. He slept on the door side of the bed because his mother had taught him that's where protectors belonged. 6 months in, Eden had started leaving poetry on his pillow. Small things, written on the backs of takeout receipts or margins of newspapers. Hunter saved every one in a box marked evidence of magic. He'd proposed 1,000 times in small ways before the ring ever entered his pocket. Bringing her father's favorite wine to dinner, learning to braid her niece's hair, showing up at her mother's hospital room with flowers, because Eden had mentioned once that her mom loved purple blooms. The night before everything changed, they'd slow danced in his kitchen. To no music, just the dishwasher's hum and rain against windows. Marry me, he'd whispered into her hair, practicing for what he'd planned to say properly over dinner the next night. Eventually she'd whispered back, not knowing that eventually had an expiration date already printed in tomorrow's gossip columns. The photo had looked like betrayal formatted for maximum impact. Hunter at the Sloan Industries Foundation gala, a woman leaning close enough to share secrets or breath, her hand on his sleeve with the intimacy of possession. The caption speculated about the mysterious brunette who'd finally captured the CEO's attention. Eden had stared at it in that restaurant bathroom until her vision blurred, doubt spreading through her chest like ink in water. She'd returned to the table differently. Hunter had seemed distracted too, checking his phone repeatedly, mentioning problems with investors that required immediate attention. When he walked her home without reaching for the ring she'd felt in his pocket, Eden had known. He'd changed his mind. I was reconsidering. The photo had been a warning she'd almost missed. The letter she'd left that night had been precise in its pain. I saw the photo. I understand if things have changed. We want different things, or maybe you want different people. I'm choosing to leave with dignity rather than wait to be left. Don't call. Let me keep the good memories intact. She'd moved within the week. A job transfer she'd been declining suddenly accepted. The pregnancy test turned positive the day she signed her new lease, cosmic timing with a cruel sense of humor. The second letter had been harder to write, mailed to his office with her new address and phone number included. I'm pregnant. I'm scared. I love you enough to let you choose what role you want in this. My number stays the same for 3 months, if you want to discuss what comes next. 3 months became 6. 6 became a year. Silence, Eden learned, was also an answer. She'd built a life from that silence. Silas at the center, work providing structure, independence becoming identity. Present day, the PICU at 5:30 in the morning had its own rhythm. Shift changes and coffee runs, parents stumbling from uncomfortable chairs with backs that would never forgive them. Talia appeared at Eden's shoulder, with the gentle insistence of someone who'd seen exhaustion win too many battles. Silas is stable, deeply asleep, and will be for hours, she said firmly. You need to walk. Eat something that isn't from the emergency stash. Remember you have legs. 10 minutes. Doctor's orders. Eden wanted to protest, but her knees cracked when she stood, making the argument for her. She kissed Silas's forehead, promised to return before he noticed, and let her. Body remember how to move through space that wasn't measured in monitor beeps. The vending machine alcove on the 3rd floor hosted a woman conducting warfare, with B4, which had apparently eaten her dollar and kept the pretzels hostage. She had a way of tilting her head when frustrated that struck Eden as familiar, though she couldn't place why. If you shake it from the left side, sometimes it takes pity, Eden offered. The woman turned, revealing sharp features and eyes that carried both intelligence and current exhaustion. Or I could just admit, the universe doesn't want me to eat hospital pretzels at dawn. She gave the machine one more futile shake. Though the granola bars in C3 sometimes work, they taste like cardboard and regret, but they're reliable. Eden fed the machine $2, pressed C3. The granola bar dropped obediently. Peace offering from one exhausted family member to another. Nova, the woman said, accepting the bar with a tired smile. And thank you. My brother's upstairs doing his best impression of someone who didn't ignore chest pain for 3 days. Apparently running a company doesn't make you immortal. Who knew? The granola bar turned to concrete in Eden's throat. Something about the phrasing, the situation, the floor they were on. Your brother? Hunter Sloan. Maybe you've heard of him. Tends to make headlines when he's not busy having heart attacks in his office. Nova unwrapped her bar, took a bite, made a face. God, these really are punishments. Someone in hospital procurement hates joy. Eden's legs suggested sitting. The floor looked reasonable. But she stayed standing through pure will, the granola bar now a prop in a performance of normal conversation. Will he be okay? Doctors say yes if he actually listens to them. Which, knowing Hunter, means hiring someone to listen for him while he ignores their advice from his hospital bed. Nova's laugh held more worry than humor. 7 years since our dad's heart attack, you'd think he'd have learned something about slowing down. But he just ran harder, like he could outpace mortality with enough productivity. 7 years. The number landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through Eden's chest. Hunter's father had died 7 years ago, the week after she'd left, based on that timeline. She'd seen the obituary, had written a sympathy card she'd never sent, afraid any contact would suggest she wanted something or that her leaving had been negotiable. I'm sorry, Eden said, meaning more than Nova could know. About your dad, about your brother, about all of it. Nova studied her with eyes that seemed to see more than Eden wanted visible. You know, it's strange. He was asking for someone when they brought him in. Delirious from pain, probably, but he kept saying a name. Eden. Our grandmother was named Eden, so maybe he was thinking of her. But the way he said it, she shrugged, like it was someone who should be called, someone who should know. The floor really did look reasonable now. Eden gripped the vending machine, metal cool against palms that had gone hot. I should get back. My son... Of course. Thank you for the cardboard bar. Nova's smile turned softer. I hope your son is okay. This place is rough on parents and kids both. Eden made it 3 steps before Nova's voice followed. Hey, I didn't catch your name? The lie sat ready on her tongue. 7 years of practice made it easy to be anyone but herself. But hospitals had a way of making truth feel necessary. Like lying here might jinx whatever recovery you were praying for. Eden, she said without turning. My name is Eden. The silence behind her stretched like a held breath. Then footsteps, quick ones, but Eden was already moving, already walking, in the urgent way that wasn't quite running but suggested an emergency. Back through doors that locked behind her, back to Silas's room where monitors promised he was safe, stable, still hers to protect. She sank into her chair, heart hammering its own medical emergency. Through the window, dawn had broken properly, painting the walls rose gold with promise she didn't trust. Somewhere above her, Hunter Sloan was recovering from a heart attack, asking for someone named Eden in his delirium. Someone who'd been 3 floors down all night, holding another piece of his history he didn't know existed. Nova would tell him. Of course she would. The stranger by the vending machine named Eden the way she'd fled, the granola bar abandoned on the nearby surface like evidence. Silas stirred, his hand seeking hers even in sleep. Eden held on. anchoring herself to this moment, this child, this life she'd built from. Silence and strength, and the absolute certainty that some doors needed to stay closed. But hospitals, she was learning, didn't respect closed doors. They brought people together in crisis, forced proximity when distance had seemed safer, made truth inevitable when avoidance had been the entire strategy. Her phone, retrieved from the car by a kind nurse during shift change, showed 17 messages. Her boss, her mother, 2 friends she'd been meaning to call back for weeks. All of them suddenly felt distant, irrelevant compared to the reality that Hunter Sloan was 3 floors above her. Hunter, who'd looked for her. Nova's casual mention of their father's death 7 years ago had reframed everything. He'd been grieving when she left, had probably been distracted at that dinner because he'd just lost his father, not because he was losing interest in her, and she'd run instead of asking. Had written letters instead of having conversations, had assumed the worst because assuming the worst meant she controlled the ending, controlled the hurt, controlled everything except the truth. Kira appeared with coffee and something wrapped in paper that might be a muffin. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," Eden said quietly. "Or maybe I just realized I've been running from one for 7 years. Want to talk about it?" Eden looked at Silas, at the peaceful rise and fall of his chest, at the son who'd never met his father because she had been too proud to follow up on an unanswered letter, too scared to try again when silence was her only response. "Hunter Sloan is upstairs," she said, "in cardiac ICU. Had a heart attack a few hours before I brought Silas in." Kira's eyes widened slightly. "Hunter Sloan, as in Sloan Industries? The tech billionaire? As in the man I left 7 years ago? The man I sent a letter to about being pregnant? The man whose father died right after I left, which I didn't know because I was too busy running to look back?" Eden's hands shook around the coffee cup. "The man whose sister I just met by the vending machine, who's probably upstairs right now telling him that someone named Eden is 3 floors down with a 7-year-old son." "Oh," Kira said softly. That's complicated. That's one word for it." Eden laughed, the sound brittle. "I spent 7 years being angry that he never responded to my letter, never once considered that maybe he didn't get it, or that he was dealing with his own crisis. I just assumed silence meant he didn't care. Did you ever try calling him directly?" "Once, 3 months after I sent the letter. Got his assistant, who said he wasn't available and would like to leave a message. I said no." The memory burned. I was so sure he knew and had chosen not to respond. Calling felt like begging for attention he'd already decided not to give. Silas shifted in sleep, the motion drawing both their attention. In the morning light, his features seemed even more clearly his father's. The stubborn chin, the way his eyebrows drew together even while dreaming, the particular shape of his hands. "What are you going to do?" Kira asked gently. "I don't know," Eden admitted. "The smart thing would be to stay down here, focus on Silas, leave when he's discharged, and pretend this never happened. Keep my life separate, safe, uncomplicated. And the honest thing," Eden thought about that. About 7 years of teaching Silas to be brave, to tell the truth even, when it was hard, to face problems instead of running from them. About the irony of building his character on principles she'd abandoned the moment they became personally costly. The honest thing would be to talk to Hunter, to tell him about Silas, to admit I made assumptions instead of asking questions. She looked at Kira. "But I'm terrified." "Of what?" "That he'll be angry I kept Silas from him. That he'll want custody, lawyers, fights. That he'll want nothing to do with us, and I'll have to explain that to Silas eventually. That he'll want everything, and I'll lose the life I built." Eden's voice cracked. "That he'll look at me and see someone who ran instead of stayed, who chose pride over partnership, who broke us and blamed him for it. Those are all valid fears," Kira acknowledged. "They're also all assumptions about what he'll think and feel. You could ask him instead." Eden looked toward the doorway, toward the elevators that could take her up 3 floors to the adult cardiac ICU, to conversations that would change everything. Again. Not now, she decided. Not while Silas is sick. Not while I'm exhausted and Hunter's recovering from a heart attack. But maybe when things are calmer, when I can think straight and he can process without machines tracking his stress levels. That's fair, Kira said. Just don't wait 7 more years to have the conversation. After she left, Eden sat with her choices, past and potential future. Somewhere above, Nova was probably telling Hunter about the vending machine encounter, and Hunter was probably doing the same math Eden had done, the same recognition, and realization and reckoning with 7 years of silence. Some storms, Eden thought, don't end when the rain stops. Some storms just wait, gathering strength for the moment when avoiding them becomes impossible. Would you have confronted him back then, or walked away? Drop your thoughts below. The adult ICU operated on different frequencies than pediatrics, less color, more gravity, machines that seemed to judge rather than just monitor. Hunter Sloan had been awake for exactly 17 minutes, and already his nurse was giving him the look. His assistant Lauren perfected years ago, exhausted disappointment mixed with reluctant fondness. Mr. Sloan, when I said you could check your messages, I meant personal ones. Not 17 emails about quarterly projections. Bradley removed the phone with practiced authority. Your heart just attempted an unscheduled exit. Maybe give it 24 hours before the hostile takeover attempts. Dr. Mira Caldwell entered, carrying charts and the kind of authority that made billionaires feel like kindergartners. Hunter Sloan, 41 years old, convinced he's immortal despite genetic evidence to the contrary. Your heart would like to file a formal complaint. I'm alive, Hunter offered, the word embarrassing in its simplicity. Barely. And only because your assistant literally carried you to the ambulance when you collapsed. Lauren probably saved your life. Doctor, Caldwell pulled up his cardiac readings on the bedside monitor. 3 days of chest pain you ignored. Shortness of breath you attributed to stress. Left arm numbness you Googled instead of addressing. Your heart attack was entirely preventable if you just listened to your body instead of your calendar. I know. Hunter had heard variations of this lecture from his father's doctors 7 years ago, had promised himself he'd be different, had lied, apparently. Rest, Dr. Caldwell prescribed with the finality of someone who'd seen too many repeat customers. Real rest. Not the kind where you work from bed, the kind where you remember you're human, not a machine optimized for productivity. She left him with that thought, and a blood pressure cuff that tightened every 15 minutes like a mechanical conscience. Hunter stared at the ceiling tiles, counting holes, because it was better than counting regrets. Nova arrived with the sunrise, carrying contraband coffee and an expression that suggested she had information he wasn't going to like. You look terrible, she announced. Thanks. Really what every heart patient wants to hear. Would you prefer lies? You're very attractive for someone whose chest tried to implode. She settled into the visitor's chair with the ease of someone who'd done this before with their father, though neither mentioned that ghost. Lauren sends her concern, and also her threat to password lock all your accounts if you check email again before noon. Lauren wouldn't. Lauren absolutely would. She's already done it. Your access expires in 43 minutes. Nova sipped her coffee, letting that land. But we need to talk about something else. Someone else, actually. Hunter's monitor betrayed him, heartbeat picking up enough to draw Bradley's attention through the doorway. A warning look suggested behavioral improvement or pharmaceutical intervention. I met someone at the vending machines this morning, Nova continued, voice carefully neutral. A woman with a son in a pediatric ICU. Her name is Eden. The name hit like electricity through damaged circuits. Hunter's chest tightened. Not cardiac this time, just the regular kind of pain that came with that particular collection of letters arranged in that particular order. She's here, Nova said simply. 3 floors down. Her son has severe asthma. Been here all night from what I could tell. Her son. The words rearranged themselves in Hunter's mind, looking for configurations that made sense. Eden, with a son. Eden here. Eden 3 floors down, while his heart tried to remember its rhythm. Did she... Hunter stopped, unsure what he was asking. Did she know I was here? Did she mention me? Did she look happy? Did she say anything about why she left? Every question felt both essential and impossible. She ran when she realized who I was talking about. Not literal running, but close. Very urgent walking in inappropriate footwear. Nova set down her coffee. Hunter, what happened between you two? Really happened, not the version where you just grew apart or timing was wrong. I don't know. The admission cost him. But lying to Nova had never worked. One day we were planning forever. The next day she was gone. Left a letter about seeing some photos, thinking I wanted someone else. I looked for her for months. Years, actually. Hired investigators, called everyone who might know where she went. But she'd vanished completely. And you never found out why she thought you'd... The Meridian Foundation Gala. There were photos with Natalie Reeves, the foundation director. We were discussing the literacy program funding, but the angle made it look... Hunter closed his eyes. Intimate. Several gossip sites ran it. I didn't think Eden would see it, or that she'd believe anything other than the truth without asking me first. But she did see it, and didn't ask. She was gone before I could explain. Changed her number, moved across the country. Even her mother wouldn't tell me where. Said Eden had made her choice, and I needed to respect it. The helplessness of it still stung. I had the ring in my pocket that night. I was going to propose properly after dinner. Instead, I found a letter about how she'd rather leave than be left. Nova was quiet for a moment, processing. And now she's 3 floors down with a son who's probably around 7 years old, if I'm guessing ages correctly. The math was obvious. Hunter had done it the moment Nova said her son. 7 years since Eden left. 7 years since the letter and the silence and the searching that led nowhere. You think he's mine? Hunter said quietly. I think math is math. I also think you should ask her instead of assuming, since assumptions seem to be what broke you two in the first place. 3 floors down, Eden was fighting her own battle with exhaustion and truth. Silas had woken twice, each time reaching for her before his eyes even opened, confirming she hadn't left. Now he slept again, the nebulizer delivering medicine in steady puffs that Eden counted like meditation. She'd started writing in her phone's notes app. Not poetry anymore, just observations. The way Silas's eyelashes made shadows on his cheeks. How his hand had grown but still fit perfectly in hers. Small things she wanted to remember when this crisis became just another story of how they'd survived. Kira appeared with water and what might charitably be called a sandwich. Breakfast. Doctor's orders. You're no use to him if you collapse. I'm fine. You're running on adrenaline and whatever that coffee was pretending to be. Eat, drink, write your notes. These small rituals matter more than you think. Kira's voice held the wisdom of someone who'd guided hundreds of parents through these halls. Your son needs you strong, not just present. Eden took a bite, tasted nothing, swallowed anyway. Through the window, the hospital was waking up. Day shift arriving, breakfast, carts rolling, the business of healing resuming its routine. Somewhere above, Hunter was learning she existed in his proximity again. Nova would have told him by now. The thought of him 3 floors up made the sandwich harder to swallow. All these years, she'd imagined what she'd say if they met again. The explanations, the accusations, the careful indifference she'd practiced. But she'd never imagined it would be here, both of them broken in different ways, both holding vigil over damaged bodies that had carried them this far. Can I ask you something? Eden surprised herself by speaking. Do you believe in timing? Like, maybe things don't work out because the timing's wrong, not because the things themselves are wrong. Kira considered this, setting down her own coffee. I believe in showing up when it matters. The rest, timing, perfect moments, ideal circumstances, that's just fear dressed up as patience. Sometimes the right time is just whenever you're brave enough to try, and if you're never brave enough, then you spend your life wondering what if, which is its own kind of prison. Kira's expression softened. Whatever you're wrestling with, Eden, your son is watching, learning how to handle hard things by watching how you handle them. That's worth considering. After she left, Eden sat with that observation. Silas was always watching, always learning. She'd taught him to face his fears about needles, about hospitals, about breathing treatments that helped but felt scary, had taught him that being brave didn't mean not being afraid. It meant doing the hard thing anyway. And here she was, too afraid to take an elevator 3 floors up and have a conversation 7 years overdue. Back upstairs, Hunter was having his own philosophical discussion with Nova, though. His heart monitor kept interrupting with opinions about his blood pressure. "You could go see her," Nova suggested. "Just talk. Like adults who used to care about each other. I can barely walk to the bathroom without Bradley threatening sedation. Besides, what would I say? Sorry I let you think I was cheating. Also, why didn't you tell me about the child who's probably mine? You could start with hello. Work your way up from there." Hello. Hunter tested the word, found it insufficient for 7 years of silence. "Hello, I'm sorry. I never stop thinking about you, by the way. Do I have a son?" The monitor's alarm cut him off, bringing Bradley on a run. "Whatever you're thinking about, stop," Bradley ordered, adjusting medications with swift precision. "Your heart can't handle emotional marathons yet. We're still in the walking to the bathroom phase of recovery." But Hunter's heart, he was learning, couldn't handle not handling it either. Eden was 3 floors down. Eden with a son who might be. The math worked, the timing worked, everything worked except the part where she'd never told him. Except she had told him, hadn't she? Nova had mentioned Eden saying something about a letter. The letter Hunter had never received. The one that had probably explained everything if it had ever reached him. "I need to see her," he told Nova, after Bradley left with stronger warnings about rest. "You need to not die first," Nova countered. "She's not going anywhere. Her son needs treatment for at least another day, according to what she mentioned. You have time." Time. Hunter almost laughed. They'd had all the time in the world once, had spent it carelessly, assuming there'd always be more. Now they had hours in a hospital, 2 floors between them, and 7 years of silence that felt both permanent and paper-thin. "Try resting," Nova suggested, standing to leave. "Real rest, like the doctor said." "I don't know how to do that." "I know." She squeezed his shoulder, gentle with his mortality. "Try anyway. Try with your body first, then with your pride. Maybe eventually try with a person." She left him with that impossible prescription. Hunter stared at the ceiling again, counting holes that looked like all the spaces where words should have been. 3 floors down, Eden was holding their son's hand. He was certain now, the math was too perfect for any other truth. If you were Eden or Hunter, what would you do next? Reach out or protect your peace? Drop a comment. And if this story has you locked in, hit like so more people find it. The thought sat heavy in his chest, heavier than cardiac damage, heavier than professional pressures or Pierce's ambitions. He had a son, a 7-year-old son who didn't know him, who'd grown up without him, who existed. 3 floors down while Hunter lay here counting ceiling tiles and regrets. "I don't know what to do with that information," he said to the empty room. Bradley appeared with a portable monitor, wheels squeaking slightly. "Mr. Sloan, Dr. Caldwell wants to try getting you mobile, just to the hall and back, but it's progress." Progress. Hunter sat up slowly, feet finding the floor for the first time since he'd arrived. Everything hurt in ways that suggested his body had opinions about being ignored for 41 years. "Easy does it," Bradley cautioned, steadying him with practiced hands. "We're not running marathons. We're remembering how to stand without the world spinning." Hunter gripped the walker, the indignity of it sharp but necessary, and took his first steps. Through the doorway, he could see the hallway, the nurse's station, the elevators in the distance. 3 floors had never seemed like such an impossible journey, but he'd made impossible journeys before. Built companies from ideas, turned concepts into empires, convinced investors that his vision was worth betting on. Surely he could manage 3 floors and a conversation. "Where to?" Bradley asked, probably already knowing the answer would be back to bed because that was the only approved destination. Hunter looked at the elevator, at the possibility it represented. How long until I can actually go somewhere? Not escape, just visit someone on another floor. Bradley followed his gaze, understanding dawning. Officially, not until tomorrow at earliest, and only if your numbers stay stable. Unofficially, he lowered his voice, Love is good medicine, but only if it doesn't spike your blood pressure into dangerous territory. So maybe start with a phone call instead of an expedition. A phone call. Hunter hadn't considered that option. Hadn't considered that maybe the first move didn't need to be grand or dramatic, just honest and small and brave enough to start. I don't have her number, he admitted. Lost it 7 years ago when she changed it. Then maybe you wait until she's ready to give it to you again. Bradley guided him back toward bed. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't pursuing, it's still enough to be found. Hunter settled back against pillows, exhausted from 30 feet of walking, from the weight of revelations, from 7 years of running toward everything except what mattered. Being still felt foreign, uncomfortable, like wearing someone else's skin. But maybe that was the point. Maybe he'd been wearing the wrong skin for 7 years, the CEO skin, the productivity skin, the armor that kept him moving but never arriving. Maybe it was time to try something different. 3 floors down, Eden was reaching the same conclusion from a different direction. That running had gotten her nowhere except alone. That pride had cost more than it protected. That maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop performing strength and start practicing honesty. Mummy. Silas's voice became soft and sleepy. You look sad. Just thinking, baby. About what? About your father, she wanted to say. About the man 3 floors up who doesn't know you exist. About 7 years of choices that seemed right at the time but looked different in hospital light. About how brave you are, she said instead, which was also true. And how I want to be as brave as you. Silas smiled, the expression sweet and trusting. You are brave. You brought me here when I couldn't breathe. That's super brave. That's different. That's easy bravery. When someone you love needs help. What's hard bravery? Eden thought about that. About elevators and conversations and admitting you were wrong. About letting people see you fail and asking them to choose you anyway. Hard bravery, she said slowly, is doing the right thing even when you're scared of what happens next. Like telling the truth even when you might get in trouble. Exactly like that. Silas nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense to his 7-year-old logic. Then you should do that, Mummy. The hard, brave thing. Because that's what you always tell me to do. From the mouths of children, Eden thought, came the wisdom adults spent lifetimes avoiding. The family lounge on the 3rd floor existed in perpetual twilight, fluorescent bulbs, trying their best against grief and exhaustion that absorbed light like black holes. Eden sat in the corner furthest from the door, sketchbook open to a page where she'd been drawing maps of nowhere. 2 dots, 1 line between them, over and over, until the paper threatened to tear. She'd left Silas sleeping, stable, his numbers perfect enough that Talia had practically pushed her out. 15 minutes, minimum. Walk, breathe. Remember, you're a person, not just a parent. But being a person felt dangerous here, in this building where her past had taken up residence 3 floors above her present. The door opened softly. Eden knew without looking. Some recognition lived in your bones, survived 7 years of silence and deliberate forgetting. Hunter moved differently now. Careful steps pushing a walker that seemed to offend him personally. His face carried new angles, exhaustion carved into spaces that had once held easier smiles. But his eyes remained exactly as she remembered, grey like storms over water, seeing too much, saying more than words could manage. Hi, Eden. 2 words. 7 years collapsed into 2 words, and the space between them, measured in medical equipment and mistakes. You shouldn't be walking around. Her voice came out steadier than her hands. Don't people who have heart attacks need rest? Apparently, I'm terrible at rest. Ask anyone. He lowered himself into a chair with the concentration of someone relearning their body's limits. Bradley, my nurse, gave me 10 minutes of freedom before he stages an intervention. Nova said you might be here. Nova's been busy. Eden closed the sketchbook, hiding her nowhere maps, vending machine reconnaissance, and family updates. She mentioned the granola bars, said they're crimes against nutrition. A ghost of his old smile appeared, then faded. Also said you run pretty fast when you want to avoid someone. I had somewhere to be. Your son? Not a question. Hunter's hands gripped the walker's handles like anchors keeping him from drifting. Nova said, "Severe asthma?" "Yes." Eden watched him process this, watched him do the math she knew he'd been doing since Nova told him. "His name is Silas. He's 7. 7. Hunter repeated it like learning a new language, testing the weight of it. Silas. That's a good name. Strong name. Silence settled between them, thick with everything they weren't saying. Eden counted her breaths, wondering if he was doing the same, if cardiac patients learned that trick too, or if it was just parents of asthmatics who measured life in inhales and exhales. "I sent a letter," she said finally, the words falling like stones into still water. "After I left. About 6 weeks later, when I found out I was pregnant, I mailed it to your office, marked personal and confidential, put my new address, my phone number, everything you'd need to contact me." Hunter's knuckles went white against the walker's handles. "What letter?" "The one telling you I was pregnant, that I was scared but keeping the baby, that I loved you enough to let you choose what role you wanted, if any." Eden's voice stayed level through practice, through 7 years of telling herself this story until it became smooth as river stones. "I waited 3 months for any response, even just acknowledgement that you'd received it. Eden." His voice cracked on her name like something breaking. "I never got any letter after you left. Just the one you left at my apartment, saying you'd seen the photos, that you were done, that you wanted a clean break." The room tilted slightly, or maybe that was just Eden's world readjusting to new information. "You never got it?" "I would have." Hunter stopped, starting again with visible effort. "I looked for you for 2 years, hired private investigators who found nothing, called your mother so many times she threatened legal action if I didn't stop, called every friend we had in common until they stopped answering. If I'd known about Silas, Eden, I never would have stopped looking. I would have been on the first flight to wherever you were." They sat with this revelation, 2 people discovering that silence hadn't been a choice but circumstance. Somewhere in the space between intention and receipt, a letter had vanished, taking with it 7 years of different possibilities. "The photo," Hunter said carefully, each word chosen with precision. "At the gala. Natalie Reeves. She ran the Foundation's literacy program. We were discussing budget allocations for underserved schools. The photographer caught a moment that looked intimate but wasn't. I should have known you'd see it. Should have called immediately to explain instead of assuming you'd know I'd never." "I should have asked instead of assumed," Eden interrupted. "I was so ready to believe you'd choose someone more polished, someone who fit your world better, who understood the galas and the foundation work and all the parts of your life I was still learning. You were my world." The words came out raw, unplanned. "I had the ring in my pocket that night. I was going to propose after dinner. Spent weeks working with a jeweler to get the design exactly right. Constellation maps inside the band. The ones from that journal I bought you at the market. The speech was memorized. The reservation was made. Everything was ready except the part where I actually said the words." Eden looked at him then, really looked. Saw the ways 7 years had changed them both, him harder around the edges, her softer in places she'd had to be for Silas. They were different people now, strangers who shared history but not present. "What was in the letter?" Hunter asked. "The one I never got. What exactly did it say?" Eden had recited it so many times in her mind that the words came easily. Muscle memory of grief, rehearsed until it became performance. That I was pregnant, that I was scared but certain, that I loved you enough to let you choose your level of involvement without pressure, that my number would stay the same for 3 months if you wanted to discuss what came next. 3 months. Hunter's laugh was bitter and short. "And when I didn't call because I didn't know to call, you thought I'd made my choice. What else was I supposed to think? You had my information." Silence felt like an answer. "My answer would have been on the first flight to wherever you were. My answer would have been whatever you needed. Marriage, support, co-parenting, anything. Everything." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, the gesture so familiar it hurt. "I have a son. A 7-year-old son I've never met because a letter got lost in the mail. Or intercepted," Eden said quietly. "You said you were hiring private investigators." Someone looking for you, trying to find me. Maybe someone didn't want that letter reaching you. Maybe it was convenient for someone if you stayed focused on work instead of family. Hunter's expression shifted, understanding dawning. My father died that week, the week you sent the letter. Heart attack in his office, exactly like mine. The company was in chaos. People were sorting through his papers, his office, handling correspondence on my behalf because I could barely function. I'm sorry, Eden said, meaning it absolutely. I saw the obituary, almost sent a sympathy card, but thought it would seem manipulative given the timing. Like I was using your grief to get your attention. You had my attention. You always had my attention, even when I should have been paying attention to other things. Hunter shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. What's he like? Silas. Besides asthma. What does he love? And despite everything, the years, the hurt, the careful walls she'd built, Eden found herself telling him about Silas's obsession with space exploration, his gentle way with younger kids at school, how he built elaborate cities from blocks and Lego with backstories for every building. She told him about soccer practices where he played goalie because running made his lungs tight, about bedtime negotiations and the particular way he tried so hard to be brave even when his body scared him. He sounds incredible, Hunter said when she finished, his voice thick with things unsaid. You've done an amazing job raising him. I had to. There wasn't another option. There should have been. I should have been an option. He shifted forward, the walker preventing him from getting as close as he wanted. Can I meet him? Not now, obviously. When things are calmer, when you feel ready, when he's well enough. I don't want to upset him or complicate his recovery, but Eden, I'd like to know my son. If you'll let me. Eden wanted to say no. 7 years of protection insisted on it. But she thought about Silas asking why other kids had fathers at school events, thought about the careful way she'd explained that sometimes families look different, and it didn't mean anyone was less loved. Thought about the truth that had lived between them all this time, waiting. He's sick right now, scared. I won't upset him while he's recovering from a severe asthma attack. Of course. I wouldn't ask that. But maybe after. When he's home, when things are stable. The words felt like stepping off a cliff, trusting the ground would appear. He deserves to know you exist, to have the choice I thought you were making 7 years ago. Hunter nodded, accepting these terms like gifts. I want to do this right, whatever right looks like now, with everything that's happened. I don't expect to just step into his life and play father. I know I have to earn that, but I'd like the chance to try. I don't know what right looks like, Eden admitted. We're not those people anymore, Hunter. The ones who danced in your kitchen and believed in forever like it was guaranteed. No, he agreed. But maybe we can be people who figure out how to share a son, how to give him what we didn't have, the whole truth, even when it's complicated, even when it means admitting we both made mistakes. Bradley appeared in the doorway, looking disapproving in that particular way healthcare professionals perfected. Mr. Sloan, your 10 minutes became 25. Dr. Caldwell is about to send security to find you. Hunter stood carefully, the walker a reluctant necessity. Eden, thank you for telling me, for letting me tell you my side. For Silas, even though I wasn't there for you. For him, she watched him move toward the door. This man who'd been mythology for 7 years now made real and fragile and sorry. Hunter, he turned, hope and hesitation warring on his face. Get better. Whatever happens next, you need to get better first. Silas needs. She stopped, corrected herself. We need you to be healthy. For whatever comes next, I will, he promised. I have reasons now, better reasons than quarterly earnings and market share. After he left, Eden sat in the empty lounge, sketchbook still closed, nowhere maps hidden from view. Everything had shifted in 25 minutes, the story she'd told herself. The anger she'd nursed, the certainty that Hunter had chosen absence. A lost letter. Such a small thing to reshape 7 years of assumptions. She returned to Silas to find him awake, reaching for water with hands. That still looked too small for all the bravery they'd shown. His color was good, breathing easy without the nebulizer for the first time since they'd arrived. "Mummy, you look different," he observed, with the clarity of children who saw things adults tried to hide. "Different how?" "Less scared. More like you look when you figure out a hard project." He accepted the water cup she offered, drinking carefully. "Did you figure something out?" "Maybe," Eden said, settling beside him. "Baby, I need to tell you something important about our family." Silas set down the water, his expression going serious the way it did when he sensed big conversations coming. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Nothing like that." Eden took his hand, anchoring herself to this moment. "You know how you've asked about your dad? Why is he not around? You said he didn't know about me, that sometimes grown-ups have communication problems." "Right. Well, he's here, in this hospital. He had a health problem too, and he's upstairs getting better." Eden watched Silas process this, his face cycling through confusion and hope and fear. "And he wants to meet you, when you're feeling stronger. If you want to meet him, did you see that twist coming? Be honest. Drop your reaction below." Silas was quiet for a long moment, his breathing staying steady but his hand tightening in hers. "Does he want to be my dad, or just meet me once?" The question broke Eden's heart clean through. "I think he wants to try being your dad, to know you and be part of your life. But we'd have to figure out what that looks like together. You, me, and him. What if I don't like him, or he doesn't like me? Then we figure that out too. But Silas, I think you'll like each other. He's smart like you, ask lots of questions like you, and he's learning to be brave about his health problems, just like you're learning." Silas nodded slowly, accepting this with the gravity of someone making important decisions. "Can I think about it? Meeting him?" "Of course. Take all the time you need. He's not going anywhere. He wants to get to know you however works best for you." "Okay." Silas settled back against his pillows, exhaustion creeping back in. "Mummy, are you scared?" "Terrified," Eden admitted honestly. "But you're doing it anyway. The hard, brave thing." "Yeah, baby. I'm doing it anyway." "Good," Silas said, his eyes drifting closed. "That's what you always tell me to do." Eden sat holding his hand as sleep claimed him again, feeling the weight and possibility of what came next. Upstairs, Hunter was making it back to his room, probably facing similar questions. From Nova, about bravery and choices and whether some risks were worth taking. Two truths now lived in the same building, 3 floors apart, but no longer separated by silence. Tomorrow would bring decisions, complications, probably more tears that weren't entirely happy. But tonight, Eden held her son's hand and let possibility exist without trying to control its shape. Hunter's hospital room had transformed into an impromptu boardroom by Tuesday morning, despite Dr. Caldwell's explicit prohibition against exactly this scenario. Lauren had arrived with laptops and apologies, followed by Pierce Donovan, Sloan Industries. Koo and the man who'd been circling Hunter's position since the ambulance doors closed. "We understand your need for recovery," Pierce said with the kind of smoothness that suggested rehearsal in front of mirrors. "But the board has a fiduciary duty to consider. Leadership continuity in moments of crisis affects shareholder confidence, market stability. I had a heart attack, not a stroke that impaired my cognitive function." Hunter's monitor beeped its disapproval of his blood pressure climbing. "The company can survive 3 days without me micromanaging every decision." Pierce's smile didn't reach his eyes, never had in the 12 years he'd been angling for the top position. "Of course, though the Singapore expansion requires executive signatures by Friday, and the investors are already nervous about your health situation. Perhaps a brief video conference to reassure stakeholders that leadership remains strong?" Nova appeared in the doorway like divine intervention, wearing designer shoes, carrying coffee that smelled expensive and judgment that looked free. "Pierce, how thoughtful of you to visit your hospitalized CEO. I'm sure your concern is purely humanitarian and not at all about the succession plan you've been drafting since Hunter's ambulance arrived. Nova, always a pleasure to see the family taking such an active interest in company affairs." Pierce gathered his briefcase with practiced dignity, retreat disguised as courtesy. Hunter, we'll table this conversation until you're feeling stronger. Lauren has the essential documents when you're ready. After he left, Nova settled into the chair with the territorial confidence of someone who earned her place through years of calling out exactly this kind of corporate maneuvering. He's already drafting press releases about temporary leadership transitions. Thought you should know before you read about your own diminished capacity in the Wall Street Journal. Hunter's chest tightened. Not cardiac this time, just the regular panic of watching vultures circle while you're still breathing. How temporary is temporary in Pierce's version? Permanent if you die, obviously. Semi-permanent if you're incapacitated, which he's defining as unable to maintain the rigorous schedule required for effective leadership. Which basically means if you start working reasonable hours, he'll claim incompetence. She slid her phone across the bedside table, showing an email chain that made Hunter's blood pressure spike enough to earn Bradley's attention from the hallway. Deep breaths, Mr. Sloan. Bradley called without entering. Whatever that phone says can't be worth another cardiac event. Nova tucked the phone away. He's right. Pierce can wait. More importantly, someone named Eden called the main hospital line, asking about visitor policies for cardiac ICU. The receptionist wouldn't give out your room number because of privacy regulations, so I'm playing messenger service. Hunter's heart monitor registered his reaction before he could control it, betraying him in beeps and climbing numbers. What did she say? That Silas is doing better, that she told him about you, that maybe, if you're feeling up to it and the doctors approve, you could visit this afternoon. Nova watched him carefully, reading reactions he couldn't hide. Are you feeling up to meeting your 7-year-old son for the first time while hooked to machines that announce your every emotional spike? I don't know. Honest answer, the only one he had. How do you do that? Meet your son when you've missed 7 years of his life, when every breath you take gets monitored and judged by electronics? Carefully, Nova suggested, and maybe with less focus on performance. Kids see through pretending better than board members do. Just be honest. You're his dad. You didn't know he existed. You're sorry and scared and want to try. She left him with instructions to rest, warnings about Pierce's ambitions, and a text thread she'd started on his behalf. Thank you for being a reasonable sibling, he'd typed. Her reply was 3 fox emojis, which he chose to interpret as affection rather than commentary on his current predicament. 3 floors down, Eden was building different kinds of boundaries with words that felt inadequate for the task. Silas sat propped against pillows, oxygen levels stable but energy depleted in that particular way that scared her, like he'd used up reserves that took weeks to refill. Can we go to the playroom today? He asked for the 4th time that morning, hope persisting despite previous denials. Tomorrow, maybe. Today we rest and let the medicine work. Eden kept her voice light, hiding the fear that lived permanently in her throat now. One setback, one overlooked symptom, and they'd be back at the crisis point where breathing was battle instead of background. Kira appeared with paperwork and the particular brand of wisdom that came from guiding hundreds of families through medical crises. He's doing great, you know. Kids bounce back faster than we think they will. Until they don't. Eden hated the bitterness in her voice, but couldn't quite swallow it back. Sorry, I'm just tired of being scared every time he takes a deep breath, which is completely normal. Also exhausting. Kira sat, clipboard temporarily forgotten. Can I share something? The parents who do best in situations like this aren't the ones who never feel afraid. They're the ones who ask for help when they need it, who admit when they're drowning, who let other people hold some of the weight. Eden thought about Hunter 3 floors up, about the conversation they'd had that rearranged 7 years of certainty into something more complicated and honest, about how she'd spent those years choosing independence over vulnerability, building a life where needing nobody felt like strength and asking for help felt like failure. What if asking for help just means more people to disappoint you? The question came out smaller than intended, more honest than safe. What if it doesn't? Kira countered gently. What if some people actually show up? What if you've been so busy protecting yourself from potential disappointment that you've guaranteed loneliness instead? The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading through assumptions Eden had built entire philosophies around. She'd made independence her religion, self-sufficiency her salvation. But sitting here watching Silas struggle to breathe, she couldn't escape the truth. She was terrified, exhausted, and desperately wanting someone else to share this weight. Later, when Silas napped and the afternoon light painted everything temporary gold, Eden found herself texting the number Nova had provided for coordination purposes or emotional crises. Whichever comes first. The response came quickly. He's awake, stable, and terrified in exactly the same ways you probably are. Perfect conditions for meeting his son. If everyone's ready. Eden stared at the message, thumb hovering over reply options that felt simultaneously too soon and too long delayed. This was the moment. The one where theory became practice, where possibility became real, where she could say no and buy more time to build walls that felt like safety. Or she could choose differently. Choose honesty. Choose the hard, brave thing her son had reminded her to do. "Give me an hour," she typed. "I need to prepare Silas. And myself." What lesson is this pointing to? Presence, communication, or courage? Comment your guess. And if you're new here, subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories. We drop powerful, true-to-life stories weekly. Upstairs, Hunter was having his own preparation conversation with Bradley, who'd been tasked with making him presentable for fatherhood while maintaining medical protocols. "You can't take the 4 out," Bradley said firmly, anticipating arguments. "Or the heart monitor. Or pretend you're not recovering from a major cardiac event just because you want to make a good impression. So I'm meeting my son while looking at a science experiment. Great first impression. You're meeting your son while taking care of yourself, which is actually a better impression than pretending to be fine when you're not." Bradley adjusted the portable monitor with practiced efficiency. Kids care less about tubes and wires than you think. They care about whether you're paying attention, whether you're honest, whether you show up. Everything else is just scenery. Show up. The phrase had been haunting Hunter for days now, ever since Eden said it in the family lounge. He'd spent 7 years being productive, efficient, successful, everything except present, and it had cost him everything that mattered. His phone buzzed with Eden's message, "Silas wants to meet you." But slowly, carefully. He's fragile right now, physically and emotionally. "Can you do it slowly and carefully?" Hunter typed back with hands that trembled slightly. "I can try. What should I know? What does he like? What scares him? What makes him feel safe?" The response came as a list. Space exploration, terrible puns, Lego architecture, strawberry. Anything being read to before sleep, knowing exactly what's happening medically instead of adults whispering around him. Small details that painted a person Hunter had missed becoming. A whole, human who existed because of choices made and unmade 7 years ago. He memorized them like prayer, these facts about his son who didn't to know him yet but might, if Hunter didn't mess this up too badly. Lauren returned with a small bag, her expression softer than her usual professional efficiency. Nova called. "Said you might want actual clothes instead of a hospital gown for meeting Silas. These are from your apartment. She has your spare key, apparently. She's used it before when I was traveling and needed something delivered." Hunter accepted the bag gratefully, finding clothes that didn't advertise his patient status quite so obviously. "Thank you for everything. For literally saving my life by calling the ambulance when I insisted I was fine. You weren't fine. You were grey and clutching your chest and trying to finish an email." Lauren's voice carried the weight of that memory. "I've worked for you for 6 years, Hunter. This is the first time I've seen you put something personal ahead of the company. It's good. Keep doing it." After she left, Hunter changed slowly, his body reminding him that heart. Attacks came with recovery timelines that didn't care about his schedule. The clothes helped, made him feel less like a patient, more like a person who might reasonably be someone's father. Bradley returned to help with the portable equipment, making Hunter mobile in ways that felt both liberating and humiliating. "Remember, 20 minutes maximum. Any sign of fatigue, chest discomfort, anything, we're done immediately. Your heart doesn't negotiate." "Understood." Hunter looked at himself in the small bathroom mirror, seeing someone who looked older than 41, more fragile than he'd ever imagined being. Do I look like someone a 7-year-old would trust? You look like someone who's been through something hard and survived it. Kids understand that better than you think. Silas has been through hard things too. You'll speak the same language. The walk to the elevator felt longer than any journey Hunter had taken, more significant than international flights to close deals, more weighted than any board meeting or investor pitch. This mattered in ways that quarterly earnings never had, never could. Nova met him at the elevator with a smile that carried both encouragement and warning. He's amazing, by the way. I stopped by to meet him while you were plotting with Lauren. Smart, curious, kind. Looks exactly like you did at that age, which is going to make denying paternity impossible even if you wanted to. I don't want to. Good. Because Eden's been raising him alone for 7 years while you were building empires. Time to build something that actually matters. She pressed the button for the 3rd floor. Be honest. Be present. Be the father you wished you'd had the chance to be 7 years ago. Everything else will figure itself out. The elevator descended, 3 floors that felt like crossing continents, like traveling through time to meet a future that had been happening without him. When the doors opened, Hunter saw Eden waiting in the hallway, her expression, carrying the same fear and hope he felt reflected in his chest. He's nervous, she said quietly. Asked about 10 questions about what dads do, whether you like the same things he likes, if you'll stay or just visit once. What did you tell him? That we'd figure it out together. That I don't have all the answers, but we'd find them as we go. Eden's hands twisted together, betraying nerves her voice didn't show. He's in room 314. I told him you're learning to be brave about your health stuff just like he's learning. That seemed to help. They walked together toward a room that held 7 years of consequence, toward a boy who existed. Because they'd loved each other once and communicated poorly and let silence become a story. At the door, Eden paused. He asked if you read books, build forts, and come to the park without looking at your phone the whole time, she said. Those are his standards for what dads do. Just so you know what you're walking into, those are good standards, Hunter said, meaning it. Better than the ones I've been living by. Eden opened the door, and Hunter stepped into a room that smelled like medicine and strawberry. Popsicles, where a small boy sat surrounded by pillows and monitoring equipment, watching the doorway with eyes that were unmistakably Hunter's own, grey like storm clouds, seeing everything, judging whether this stranger was safe or dangerous, or somewhere in between. Hi, Hunter said, the most inadequate greeting in human history. I'm Hunter. Your mom said maybe we could meet? Silas studied him with the serious consideration of someone who'd learned early that adults needed evaluating before trust could be extended. His gaze traveled from Hunter's 4 to the portable monitor to the careful way he moved, cataloging vulnerability with the expertise of someone who lived with his own. You're sick too, Silas observed, not quite a question. Yeah. My heart got tired from not taking good enough care of it. Hunter moved slowly to the chair Eden had positioned beside the bed, lowering himself with careful dignity. But it's getting better, kind of like your lungs. My lungs have asthma. What does your heart have? The question was so direct, so innocent in its curiosity, that Hunter almost laughed. Blockages that made it hard to pump blood. And regret, which isn't a medical condition but probably should be. The doctors fix the blockages. I'm working on the regret. Silas nodded like this made perfect sense. Mom says regret is when you wish you'd made different choices. Do you have a lot of those? More than I can count, Hunter admitted. But the biggest one is not knowing you existed until 2 days ago. That's the regret I wish I could fix most. Mom said you didn't get her letter. Sometimes important things get lost. Yeah, important things definitely got lost. But I'm here now, and I'd like to know you. If you want to know me, Hunter's voice cracked slightly, betraying emotions he couldn't quite control. I know I can't be your dad just because we share DNA. I know I have to earn that. But I'd like the chance to try. Silas was quiet for a long moment, his breathing staying steady but his small hands gripping the blanket with visible tension. Finally, do you like space? I do. especially the way stars are actually looking backward in time, because light takes so long to reach us. That's my favorite part too. Silas's face lit up with the kind of joy that transformed features into pure delight. And how there are probably planets we can't even see yet because their light hasn't gotten here. And just like that, they were talking about exoplanets and rovers, about whether Mars colonies would happen in Silas's lifetime, about the James Webb Telescope images that looked like paintings of creation. Hunter felt 7 years of absence compressed into this moment, this conversation. This chance to know the person he'd helped create but never met. Eden watched from the doorway, seeing her son and his father discover each other in space facts and terrible astronomy puns, in shared curiosity and the particular magic of finding someone who spoke your language. Tears slid down her face unchecked. Grief for what they'd missed, gratitude for what they'd found, terror about what came next. Kira appeared beside her, offering tissues and a quiet presence. "This is what starting over looks like," she whispered. "Messy and beautiful and brave." Eden nodded, unable to speak past the emotion lodged in her throat. In the room, Hunter was explaining gravitational lensing, while Silas listened with rapt attention. And for the first time in 7 years, the family that should have been was beginning to exist. 20 minutes stretched into 40 before Bradley appeared in the doorway with a gentle knock. That interrupted a debate about whether black holes could theoretically be used for time travel. Hunter had forgotten about the portable monitor entirely, forgotten about the force still attached to his arm, forgotten everything except the way Silas's face lit up when explaining complex physics concepts he'd learned from library books. "Mr. Sloan, your heart rate's been elevated for 30 minutes, Bradley said quietly. "Not dangerously, but consistently. We should probably wrap up for today." Silas's expression fell so completely that Hunter felt it like a physical blow. "Already? I'm sorry, buddy. My heart needs rest after it works hard, kind of like how your lungs need rest after an asthma attack." Hunter looked at Bradley with something close to pleading. "But maybe I could come back tomorrow, if that's okay with your mom?" Eden stepped forward from her position by the door, wiping at eyes that had been leaking quietly for the past half hour. "If you're feeling up to it, and the doctors approve, I think Silas would like that." "I would," Silas confirmed, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something first?" "Anything," Hunter promised. "Are you my dad? Like, really officially?" The question came out small but determined, the voice of someone who needed truth more than comfort. "Mom said you are, but I wanted to hear you say it." The room went silent, except for the quiet hum of medical equipment and the sound of Hunter's heart monitor registering the spike of emotion that question caused. He looked at Eden, who nodded slightly, giving permission for honesty she'd already granted. "Yes," Hunter said, his voice rough with tears he wasn't quite managing to contain. "I'm your dad, your father. I didn't know about you until 2 days ago. Your mom sent me a letter 7 years ago that I never received. But I would have been there from the beginning if I'd known. I would have been at the hospital when you were born, at every doctor's appointment, every birthday, every time you were scared or sick or needed someone." "Why didn't you get the letter?" Silas asked, needing the logic to make sense. "We don't know exactly. It got lost somewhere between your mom sending it and me receiving it. Sometimes important things get lost in ways that change everything." Hunter leaned forward as much as his equipment allowed. "I'm so sorry I missed all those years, Silas. I can't get them back, and that's going to hurt for both of us probably. But I'm here now, and I want to be here for everything that comes next. If you'll let me—" Silas was quiet, processing with the gravity of someone making life-altering decisions. Tears started sliding down his cheeks, small, brave, honest expressions of feelings too big for 7-year-old containers. "Don't cry, sweetheart," Eden said softly, moving to sit on the bed beside him. "I'm not sad crying," Silas managed through the tears. "I'm confused and crying, and happy crying, and scared crying all mixed together. That's a lot of different cryings," Hunter said gently. "Want to tell me what each one's about?" Silas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, the gesture so achingly young that Hunter's chest cracked wider. "Happy because I always wanted a dad. Confused because I don't know how to have one when I never did before. Scared because what if you change your mind? What if you decide being a dad is too hard and you leave? The fear in that question, the evidence of what Eden had navigated alone, the questions she'd answered, the reassurances she'd provided while managing her own abandonment, hit Hunter like a second cardiac event. "I won't change my mind," he said with all the certainty he could muster. "Being your dad isn't something I'm trying out. It's who I am now that I know you exist. And yeah, I'll probably mess up sometimes because I've never been anyone's father before. But I won't leave. I won't decide you're too hard or not worth the effort. You're worth everything, Silas." Do dads read books? Silas asked each question a test of standards set by 7 years of absence. Every night, not just sometimes. "Yes," Hunter promised. "Every night you want, whatever books you choose. Do they build forts? Real ones with blankets and chairs, not just buying fancy tents from stores?" "Absolutely. The more elaborate the better. Engineering challenges are my specialty. Do they come to the park and play, not just sit on benches looking at their phones?" This question landed heavier than the others, carrying the weight of what Silas had observed. In other families, what he'd wondered about, in the abstract father he'd imagined, Hunter thought about 7 years of phone addiction, of checking emails, during dinners, of being physically present, but mentally elsewhere. "Yes," he said, meaning it as a vow. "Especially that. Being there, really there, not just my body while my mind is in a meeting. I've been learning that being present is more important than being productive. You're already teaching me that, and I haven't even known you for an hour." Silas took a shaky breath, then another steadier one, the kind Eden had taught him to take when emotions threatened to overwhelm his lungs. "Okay, we can try then, being a dad and son. Even though neither of us knows how. We'll figure it out together," Hunter said, echoing Eden's earlier words. "Make mistakes, apologize, try again. That's how families work, I think." Bradley cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Sloan, really. Your numbers are climbing." "Okay." Hunter stood reluctantly, every fiber wanting to stay in this room, where his son existed in 3 dimensions instead of imagination. But Bradley was right. His chest felt tight in ways that suggested his heart had opinions about this much emotion so soon after nearly quitting entirely. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back to Silas. "Thank you for giving me a chance, for being brave enough to meet me even though you were scared. That takes real courage." "Mom says courage is doing the hard thing even when you're scared," Silas said. "She's been doing that a lot lately." Hunter looked at Eden, really looked at her for the first time since entering the room, saw the exhaustion around her eyes, the fear she'd been managing alone, the strength it had taken to let him into this room, into their lives, into the careful structure she'd built from abandonment and determination. "Your mom is the bravest person I know," he said quietly. "She's been doing the hard thing for 7 years, while I didn't even know I should be helping." After Hunter left, escorted by Bradley with warnings about rest and limits, Eden sat with Silas in the kind of silence that felt like processing rather than absence of words. "Do you like him?" Silas asked finally. "I used to love him," Eden said honestly, "before things got complicated, before the misunderstandings and the letters that didn't arrive. Now I don't know what I feel except that he seems sincere about wanting to know you." "He knew about gravitational lensing," Silas said, as if this settled important questions about character, "and he promised to build forts. Real ones." "Those are good signs," Eden agreed, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "But we take this slow, okay? Let everyone get healthy first. Then we figure out what having a dad in your life looks like." "Okay." Silas yawned, the emotional weight of the meeting catching up with his already depleted reserves. "Mommy." "Yeah, baby? I'm glad you did the hard, brave thing, even though it was scary." Eden kissed his forehead, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized were still falling. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Upstairs, Hunter made it back to his room before his legs gave out, before the adrenaline that had sustained him through meeting his son evaporated and left only the reality of a body still healing from crisis. Bradley helped him back into bed with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out before. "How was it?" Bradley asked, adjusting the monitors that Hunter had temporarily escaped. Terrifying, perfect, heartbreaking, everything. Hunter stared at the ceiling, seeing Silas's face instead of tiles. "I have a son, Bradley. A real, actual son who likes space and bad puns, and needs someone to build forts with." "You do," Bradley confirmed. "And based on your cardiac readings, you also have a heart that needs rest before you try to be super dad. So we're having a quiet time now. No visitors, no phone calls, just you and your healing organ having a conversation about limits." Nova appeared in the doorway despite Bradley's clear preference for solitude. "5 minutes," she promised. "I just need 5 minutes to see if my brother survived meeting his son." Bradley sighed but stepped into the hallway, muttering about families and boundaries and why nobody listened to medical professionals. Well, Nova demanded the moment they were alone. "How did it go?" He asked if dads build forts and play at the park without looking at their phones. Hunter's voice cracked. "Those are his standards. Those are the things that matter to a 7-year-old who's never had a father. Not money or success or any of the things I've been chasing. Just presence and attention and showing up. Can you do that? Show up consistently, not just in the exciting beginning, but in the boring middle and the hard parts." "I have to," Hunter said simply. "Because the alternative is being the kind of man who meets his son and then goes back to being too busy. And I can't be that person. Not anymore. Not when I know what I almost missed." Nova studied him with eyes that had known him his entire life, that had watched him build companies and neglect relationships, that had loved him through every version of himself he'd tried on. "You're different," she observed. "Something changed." "I almost died," Hunter pointed out. "That changes people." "No. This is different from almost dying. This is choosing differently." Nova's expression softened into something like pride. "You're choosing the hard thing. The presence over performance. The relationship over the resume." "I'm choosing my son," Hunter corrected. "Everything else is just logistics." After she left, Hunter lay in the dark of his hospital room, listening to the monitor track his heart's steady rhythm. Somewhere 3 floors below, Silas was falling asleep to the same mechanical symphony. His small chest rising and falling with the help of medicine and determination. Hunter thought about all the nights he'd missed, 7 years of bedtimes, of nightmare comfort, of stories read and songs sung badly. Thought about birthday cakes and first days of school, about scraped knees and small victories he'd never witnessed. He couldn't get those moments back, couldn't undo 7 years of absence or make up for all the times Silas had needed a father and had only his mother's fierce sufficiency. But he could start now. Could show up tomorrow and the day after, could build a relationship from honest pieces instead of perfect ones, could be the father Silas deserved, even if he had no idea how to do it yet. His phone buzzed with a message from Eden. "He's asking when you can visit again." "Tomorrow, if you're cleared for it?" Hunter typed back with hands that still trembled slightly. "Tomorrow. And every day after that he'll have me, for as long as he wants." The response came quickly. "That might be a very long time. He's already planning the fort he wants to build with you." "Good," Hunter wrote. "I've got time now. All the time that matters." He set the phone aside and closed his eyes, letting medication and exhaustion pull him toward sleep. Tomorrow he'd wake up to board pressures and Pierce's ambitions and all the complications of a life that suddenly had priorities he'd never planned for. But tonight, he was someone's father, someone's dad. And that mattered more than anything else ever had. In room 314, 3 floors down, Silas fell asleep holding a small book about foxes learning to be brave, dreaming about stars and forts and the dad who'd promised to show up. Eden sat beside him in the chair that had become her home, watching her son breathe easy for the first time in days. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace. But inside these walls, 2 families were becoming one, slowly, carefully, bravely, built not on perfect circumstances but on honest choices, not on what should have been, but on what could be starting now. Talia stopped by during late rounds, saw mother and son sleeping peacefully, and smiled before closing the door quietly. Some healings, she knew, happened beyond what medicine could measure. This was one of those. Discharge day arrived with the particular chaos of hospital exits, paperwork multiplying like anxious rabbits, nurses delivering final instructions with the gravity of sacred texts, and Silas wearing a fox-themed shirt that Nova had somehow procured overnight along with balloons, declaring brave kid that bobbed against the ceiling like small celebrations of survival. The orderly who'd wheeled Hunter through countless cardiac tests appeared with theatrical flair at Hunter's door 2 floors up. "Mr. Sloan, your chariot awaits. Try not to have any more cardiac events on my watch. The paperwork is unreasonable." Hunter laughed, the sound coming easier now after 4 days of forced rest and honest conversations. "I'll do my best, Davis. See that you do." Davis's grin softened as he helped Hunter into the wheelchair. Hospital protocol demanded, "Really though, take care of yourself. I heard you've got a kid now. Kids need their dad's vertical and breathing." "Working on it," Hunter promised, meaning it more than he'd meant any corporate pledge. 3 floors down, Talia wrapped Silas in a hug that felt like benediction and promise combined. "You remember everything we talked about? Inhaler locations, warning signs, when to call the doctor immediately. Every bag, every room, always accessible," Silas recited with the precision of someone who'd learned these lessons the hard way. "And if I feel tight or wheezy or too tired to play, I tell Mom right away." Not being brave about breathing because breathing isn't optional. Perfect student. Talia handed Eden a folder thick with instructions, prescriptions, and follow-up appointments. "You've got this. And we're here if you need us. Call any time, even if it's just to ask if something's normal. That's what we're here for." Eden accepted the folder with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear this time, but from the weight of responsibility she was carrying back into the world. 4 days ago, she raced through the rain with a son who couldn't breathe. Now she was walking out with discharge papers and a future that looked nothing like the one she'd imagined. The drive home happened in Hunter's rental, a sensible sedan instead of the luxury car he'd arrived in, chosen specifically for car seat compatibility and trunk space for medical equipment. Lauren had handled the logistics with her characteristic efficiency, delivering the car, along with installation instructions for the booster seat that now occupied the back. "Your assistant thinks of everything," Eden observed, navigating from the passenger seat while Silas provided commentary about every interesting cloud formation and construction site they passed. "She's kept me alive for 6 years through sheer force of will and superior organizational skills," Hunter admitted from the driver's seat, still moving carefully, still aware of his body's new limitations. "Though apparently keeping me alive now includes making sure I can safely transport my son. Her job description has evolved." "Does she know about Silas?" "Everyone knows. Nova told everyone. The board, the executive team, probably the janitorial staff. She's not subtle when she's excited." Hunter glanced in the rearview mirror at Silas, who was explaining the difference between cumulus and cumulonimbus clouds to no one in particular, but I'm glad she did. Tired of hiding what matters. Spent too many years pretending work was enough. Eden looked at him, really looked, seeing changes that went deeper than 4 days of hospital rest. Something fundamental had shifted, some priority restructuring that showed in the way he checked the mirror to smile at Silas instead of reaching for his phone at red lights. Hunter's penthouse had been transformed during his hospital stay. Nova and Lauren had conspired to install medical-grade air purifiers in every room, remove every dust-collecting surface that might trigger Silas's asthma, and stock the kitchen with things 7-year-olds actually ate. The balcony featured a telescope pointed at daytime sky with instructions for optimal nighttime viewing, and the guest room, now Silas, his room for whenever he visited, held more Lego than any child reasonably needed, and a bookshelf filled with space exploration guides. "This is temporary," Eden said, surveying the thoughtfulness with something between gratitude and panic, "until we figure out actual arrangements, custody schedules, legal frameworks, all the official stuff that makes this work long-term." Or, Hunter suggested carefully, setting down the bags he'd been carrying, "we could just see how it goes. Build the structure around what works, instead of forcing what works into rigid structure." Figure out what Silas needs and organize our lives around that, instead of the other way around. That's not how custody agreements work. I don't want a custody agreement that treats Silas like property to be divided. Hunter's voice was gentle but firm. I want a family arrangement that treats him like a person whose needs come first. If that means I'm here some nights and you're here some nights and we're both here some nights, then that's what we do. If it means something else entirely, we'll figure it out. Together. Eden wanted to argue, wanted to insist on boundaries and rules and clear definitions that couldn't shift under her. But she thought about Silas asking if Dad stayed or just visited, thought about 7 years of rigid control that had kept her safe but lonely, thought about maybe trying something different. Okay, she said finally. We try it your way. Flexible, responsive, focused on what Silas needs instead of what we're comfortable with. Our way. Hunter corrected. Not my way. We're making this up together as we go. That first evening, they built a blanket fort in the living room because Silas mentioned. Loving them and Hunter had 7 years of missed fort building to compensate for. They engineered it with the seriousness of actual architecture, load-bearing couch cushions, strategically draped. Sheets, structural integrity tested by Silas crawling through with the gravity of a building inspector. It's perfect, Silas declared from inside the fort, his voice muffled by blankets. This is exactly what forts are supposed to be. Eden made soup from a recipe her mother had used during childhood sick. Days, simple, warm, the kind of food that felt like care in a bowl. Hunter brewed tea in a dented kettle he'd kept from their old life, muscle, memory adding too much sugar to Eden's cup before he could stop himself. She didn't correct him this time, just drank it sweet and remembered when that had been endearing, instead of evidence of not being heard. Later, after Silas fell asleep in his new room, clutching the Fox book Hunter had read to him in the hospital, Eden and Hunter stood on the balcony watching the city lights perform their nightly symphony. The kiss happened slowly, carefully, not passion exactly, but gratitude and possibility, and the willingness to try again with more honesty this time. We're going to mess this up sometimes, Eden warned against his shoulder, breathing. In the familiar scent that memory had kept more accurate than she'd realized. Have disagreements about parenting, about schedules, about boundaries. All the things people fight about when they're navigating complicated situations. Probably, Hunter agreed, his arms careful around her like she might break or flee. But maybe we can mess it up together this time, out loud, with actual communication instead of assumptions and letters that don't arrive. Revolutionary concept for us. I'm trying new things, being present instead of productive, asking for help instead of handling everything alone, admitting when I'm scared instead of pretending competence I don't have. He turned her to face him, hands gentle on her shoulders. I told Pierce I'm stepping back from being CEO, staying on the board, consulting on major decisions, but hiring someone who actually wants to run an empire while I figure out how to be a father. Eden stared, genuinely shocked. You're walking away from Sloan Industries. Not walking away, choosing different priorities. Hunter's smile carried peace she'd never seen in him before, not even in their early days when everything felt possible. Turns out, nearly dying clarifies what matters, and what matters is right here. You, Silas, building something real instead of just successful. I've got enough money to last several lifetimes. What I don't have is several lifetimes to spend with my son. So I'm choosing the one lifetime I've got. The new normal took shape in small practices that added up to transformation. No phone dinners where they actually talked, sharing stories about their day without digital interruption. Shared calendars that tracked Silas's activities, medical appointments, and the careful choreography of Kyo parenting between two people learning to trust each other again. A phrase Eden taught them both, our team is bigger now, deployed during disagreements. To remember they were building together, not competing for control. Hunter learned to ask for help without shame, calling Nova when he didn't understand. Second-grade math homework that involved methods he'd never learned, texting Lauren. For advice about work-life balance she'd been recommending for years, admitting to. Eden when he felt overwhelmed instead of pretending competence he didn't possess. Each request felt like failure at first, then gradually became just how families functioned, together, imperfectly, honestly. 3 months after discharge, Hunter stood before Sloan Industries' board, with an announcement that made Pierce visibly twitch in his custom suit. Effective immediately, I'm implementing mandatory work hour caps across all departments, expanded parental leave regardless of gender, and establishing a children's respiratory health fund dedicated to families facing asthma and related crises. The fund will be named the Silas Parker Initiative, after my son, who taught me that. Breathing is a gift we take for granted until someone we love has to fight for it. The board approved because refusing would look monstrous in the press, but several members looked genuinely confused about this version of Hunter, who chose humanity over profit margins. "What happened to you in that hospital?" Pierce asked afterward, bewilderment winning over his usual calculated composure. "I met my son," Hunter said simply. "Everything else kind of reorganized around that. And you're seriously stepping back? Letting someone else run the company you built?" "I'm letting someone else run the company while I build the family I should have had 7 years ago. Different priorities, Pierce. You should try them sometime." Eden's workshop expanded from her cramped apartment studio to a proper space downtown, funded partially by Hunter's investment, but mostly by her own growing client base that had somehow survived her week-long absence during Silas's hospitalization. She taught kids and adults to make journals, small wooden boats, and courage, intangible forms they could hold when everything else felt uncertain. Silas attended sometimes, helping younger children while carefully monitoring his own breathing, modeling bravery that acknowledged limits instead of pretending they didn't exist. He'd become something of a spokesperson among his peers for managing chronic illness, the kid who wore his inhaler on his belt, without shame, who explained to curious classmates how his lungs worked differently, but that difference didn't mean broken. On Saturdays, they had breakfast at the Riverside Market, where Eden and Hunter had first met 7 years ago. Silas collected facts about constellations to share with his father, who listened, with attention that didn't wander to phones or profit projections. Eden sketched them sometimes, 2 heads bent together over maps of stars, building traditions that felt like home. The lessons emerged not in grand declarations, but in daily choices. Presence beats performance. Every time Hunter chose bedtime stories over conference calls, chose park visits over board meetings, chose being fully there over being partially everywhere. Communication before assumption when Eden asked about his intentions instead of guessing at them. When they talked through disagreements instead of letting silence calcify into resentment. Help was requested early when Silas felt his chest tighten and told them immediately, trusting that their team was bigger now and support was available without shame. "You know what I've learned?" Hunter said one night after tucking Silas in, emerging to find Eden, making tea in his dented kettle that had somehow become their kettle. "Love isn't the big moments. It's not proposals or perfect timing or getting everything right. It's showing up consistently, being there for the boring parts, the hard parts, the parts that don't make good stories." "This made a pretty good story," Eden countered, gesturing at their life, the nebulizer on the counter beside the fruit bowl, Silas's artwork covering the refrigerator, 2 adults learning to build a family from honest pieces instead of perfect ones. "Fair point. But the story isn't the destination. It's just proof we showed up when it mattered." Hunter pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with sawdust from the workshop. "I spent 7 years chasing headlines and quarterly earnings and market dominance. This is so much better. This matters in ways those things never did." Through the doorway, they could see into Silas's room, his chest rising and falling in easy rhythm, surrounded by Lego cities and star charts and the Fox book that had facilitated their first real conversation. A boy who'd almost lost his breath, saved by a mother who'd chosen presence over panic. Met by a father who'd learned that hearts break from more than blocked arteries. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, indifferent to individual stories of loss and recovery. But inside this home built from second chances and first truths, 3 people had discovered what actually mattered. Not the performance of perfect lives, but the practice of showing up imperfectly together. Hunter's heart beat steady now, monitored by cardiologists who marveled at his recovery and his commitment to lifestyle changes that put health over ambition. But the real healing, he knew, had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the 7-year-old down the hall who'd taught him that being brave meant asking for help, that being present meant putting down your phone, that being loved meant letting people see you fail and choosing you anyway. Nova visited often, bringing sarcasm and Fox-themed gifts in equal measure, claiming aunt privileges she'd been denied for 7 years. Lauren reported that the company thrived under new leadership that actually wanted the CEO position and all its demands. Dr. Caldwell scheduled annual checkups with continued threats about lifestyle choices and warnings that hearts didn't offer third chances. And somewhere in desk drawers, 2 letters remained as evidence of how silence costs more than truth ever could. How assumptions destroy more than honesty ever would. How small choices about communication could reshape entire lives. But that was history. This was now breakfast negotiations and homework struggles, park visits, where Hunter kept his phone in his pocket and his attention on his son. Small choices building big love, one present moment at a time. Presence over performance. Communication before assumption. Help requested early. These weren't revolutionary principles, weren't complicated philosophies requiring advanced degrees to understand. They were simple truths Eden and Hunter had learned the hard way through 7 years of separation, and 4 days in a hospital where proximity forced honesty they'd been avoiding. If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories. Drop your biggest takeaway in the comments and turn on notifications so you never miss a premiere. Because every story here reminds us it's never too late to choose what matters. It's never too late to show up. It's never too late to build the family you should have had from honest pieces instead of perfect ones. Hunter's phone buzzed one last time, a message from the new CEO about quarterly projections. He glanced at it, then set the phone down without responding. Tomorrow was soon enough for business. Tonight was for family, for being present, for the life that mattered more than any spreadsheet ever could. Ready for bed? Eden asked, finishing her too-sweet tea without complaint. Ready for whatever comes next, Hunter said, meaning it. As long as we're facing it together. They walked down the hallway toward their separate rooms, still navigating what together meant, still figuring out boundaries and possibilities. But for the first time in 7 years, they were figuring it out together instead of apart, with honesty instead of assumption, with presence instead of performance. And that, they were learning, made all the difference.